Darkness. Cold dirt pressing against her stomach. Spiderwebs catching in her hair. 12-year-old Wren Brooks lay flat beneath the floorboards of an abandoned cabin pressed to a gap between rotting planks. Above her, through that narrow slice of light, she could see the rope burns on Sophie Carter's wrists, could see the 9-year-old girl's chest rising and falling in shallow, terrified breaths, could see the gag cutting into the corners of her mouth. Wren's own breath came quiet, controlled, the way her father had taught her since she was old enough to walk in the woods. When you don't know what's watching, you make yourself invisible first. You assess second. She reached up through the gap. Her fingers just barely touched the knot behind Sophie's head. "Down here," Wren whispered. "Don't make a sound." Sophie's eyes went wide, found Wren's single visible eye peering up from below. "My name is Wren. I'm 12. I'm a Girl Scout. I saw him bring you here last night. I followed you both. I know you're in danger. I'm going to help you." Sophie made a muffled sound behind the gag, part sob, part hope. "I'm going to take this off for 1 minute," Wren said, "but we have to be quiet. He could come back any second." "Okay," Sophie nodded frantically. Wren worked at the cloth, loosened it, pulled it down around Sophie's neck. The girl gasped for air like she'd been underwater. "What's your name?" Wren asked. "Sophie. Sophie Carter." Her voice cracked. "My dad is Marcus Carter. That man that's my Uncle Ryan. He's going to kill me. He said so. Please, please help me." "Your dad is looking for you right now," Wren said. The certainty in her voice surprised even herself. "I promise, I'm leaving trail markers. Broken branches, stacked rocks. So when they search, they'll find you. But I need you to stay strong. Can you do that? How long? I don't know, but I'm not leaving. I'm going to keep you alive until they get here." Wren pulled a water bottle from her backpack, half full, filtered from the stream that morning using the purification tablets her father had packed in her emergency kit. She passed it up through the gap between floorboards. Sophie grabbed it, drank desperately. Water ran down her chin. Wren gave her a granola bar next. Sophie ate it in 4 bites. Then Wren pulled a piece of paper from her journal and wrote quickly in the dim light filtering through the cabin's broken window. "Your dad loves you. Help is coming. Stay strong. Wren." She passed it through the gap. Sophie clutched it like a lifeline. "I have to put the gag back on," Wren said. "I'm sorry, but if he finds it off, he'll know someone helped you. I'll come back. I promise." "Okay." Sophie's voice was small, scared, but steady. Wren reached up, retied the gag. Sophie didn't fight. Then she heard it. Footsteps, heavy boots on fallen leaves outside. Ryan Carter was coming back. Wren scrambled backward through the dirt, replaced the loose floorboard, sprinted into the trees. She reached her observation post behind the fallen log and the dense wall of rhododendron 15 seconds before Ryan walked back into the cabin, carrying an empty water bottle he'd just filled from the stream 200 yards east. Wren crouched, heart slamming against her ribs, breathing hard, trying to be silent. She just kept a promise, the first of many, and now the clock was ticking. 61 hours left until Sunday, 2 in the afternoon, when Ryan Carter planned to kill his 9-year-old niece and bury her body somewhere in 500,000 acres of forest where she would never be found. But before we get to how Wren Brooks ended up beneath that cabin floor, before we understand why a 12-year-old girl chose to stay when running, would have been safer when smarter, when what any reasonable person would have done, we need to go back. Back to Thursday morning, October 17, 2019. Back to when the worlds of 3 people, a girl, a father, and a broken man were about to collide in the mountains of western North Carolina in ways none of them could have predicted. Subscribe now, because this story doesn't go where you think it will. And you need to see how a promise kept by a child brought 127 Hells Angels and the FBI to a forgotten cabin in the woods. But first ask yourself this. When was the last time you kept a promise that cost you everything? Thursday morning started normal for Wren Brooks. 6:15 a.m. Her alarm buzzed in the small bedroom of the ranger station, housing where she lived with her father Garrett Brooks on the eastern edge of Pisgah National Forest. She dressed in the dark. Jeans, thermal shirt, her Girl Scout uniform vest with 20 merit badges sewn on in neat rows. She'd earned every single one. Downstairs, her father was already awake. Always was. 19 years as a park ranger had made him a creature of dawn and discipline. He stood at the kitchen counter packing her gear. A red backpack. Waterproof. The same one he'd used when he was her age, and his own father had taught him to survive in these same mountains. "Morning, little bird," he said without looking up. He'd called her that since she was 3. Wren, little bird. It fit. "Morning, Dad? You ready for this?" "I think so." Thinking isn't knowing. He turned, met her eyes. Garrett Brooks was tall, lean, face weathered from 2 decades of sun and wind. He had the kind of hands that looked rough but moved with surgeon's precision when he tied knots or started fires or tracked deer through underbrush. "Tell me what you packed." Wren recited from memory. Water filter, iodine tablets, rope, first aid kit, fire starter, knife, compass, topo map, emergency blanket, signal mirror, 6 granola bars, 2 packs of jerky, trail mix. Enough supplies for 48 hours. Good, and what's the first class requirement? Solo camping, 2 nights. Demonstrate wilderness survival skills. Fire building, water purification, navigation, signaling, wilderness first aid. Keep a journal documenting all decisions. He nodded, zipped the pack closed, handed it to her. "You know these woods," he said. "You've been walking them since you could stand. But knowing the trail and surviving alone are different things. You understand?" "Yes, sir." Fear is normal. Fear keeps you alive. But panic kills. So when something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, you stop. You breathe. You think. You do the right thing even when the right thing is hard. Especially when it's hard. You hear me? "I hear you." He pulled her into a hug. Quick. Tight. Then let go just as fast, because Garrett Brooks wasn't a man who showed emotion easily, but when he did, it counted. "I love you, little bird. I'll be at the ranger station all weekend. You've got the emergency radio if you need it, but you won't need it. You're ready." "I love you too, Dad." 20 minutes later, Wren Brooks stood at the Deep Creek trailhead with her pack on her shoulders and 500,000 acres of wilderness ahead of her. The October sky was that perfect pale blue that only happens in the mountains. The air smelled like pine and cold earth and possibility. She checked her compass, adjusted her pack straps, and walked into the forest alone. By noon, she'd hiked 4 miles. By 3 in the afternoon, she'd found her campsite, a small clearing near a stream with good water access and natural cover from wind. She built her lean-to shelter using paracord and a waterproof tarp, gathered firewood, purified water, ate 1 granola bar and drank exactly half of 1 water bottle, because her father had taught her to ration supplies like your life depends on it, because someday it will. By 7 p.m. Thursday, as the sun dropped behind the ridgeline and darkness settled into the forest like a living thing, Wren had a small fire burning in a ring of stones. She sat beside it, writing in her journal by the light of her red filter headlamp. October 17th, 2019. Day 1. Shelter built. Fire started on 2nd attempt. Water purified, no injuries. Weather clear. Temperature approximately 45 degrees. She was about to write more when she heard it. Footsteps. Heavy. Irregular. Someone moving fast through rough terrain. Wren's training kicked in before conscious thought did. She grabbed a handful of dirt. Smothered the fire. The world went dark except for the red glow of her headlamp. She switched it off. Grabbed her pack. Moved to the tree line at the edge of her clearing. 30 seconds of silence. Just wind in the branches, her own heartbeat, then the sound again. Closer now, maybe 200 yards out, and then he came into view. The man was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing jeans and a dark jacket that looked too thin for October in the mountains. He had a backpack slung over one shoulder, and in his arms, draped across both forearms like something broken, was a child. A little girl. She was small. 8 or 9 years old, Wren guessed. Light brown hair that hung loose past her shoulders. She wore fleece pajamas, purple with unicorns. One of her white socks had fallen off somewhere between wherever she'd been taken and here. Her arms dangled. Her head lolled against the man's chest. She wasn't moving. Wren's first thought, the one that hit her like cold water, was simple. That's not right. Parents don't carry unconscious children through the woods at night. Parents don't run through rough terrain in the dark, breathing like they're being chased, looking over their shoulders every 10 steps. Parents don't take kids in pajamas 3 miles from the nearest road. The man stopped once, maybe 40 yards from where Ren crouched behind a fallen hemlock. He adjusted his grip on the girl, shifted the backpack, checked behind him again, scanning the forest like he expected someone to be following. Then he muttered something Ren couldn't quite hear. Something about almost there and 1 more mile. And he kept moving. Ren didn't think. She just followed. Her Girl Scout training took over. The tracking lessons her father had drilled into her since she was 8. The stalking exercises her troop practiced on weekend campouts. The skills that were supposed to be for finding deer trails and identifying animal prints, not for trailing a man who might be dangerous. Ren moved from tree to tree, staying 30 yards back, stepping where the ground was soft, avoiding dry branches. Her heart hammered, her hands shook, but her feet knew what to do. The man moved northeast, uphill, into a part of the forest Ren hadn't explored yet. The terrain got rougher. Limestone outcrops jutting through the soil, dense thickets of rhododendron that forced them both to take winding paths. By 7:45, full darkness had settled. The man pulled out a flashlight, cheap one that cast a weak yellow beam. Ren kept her red headlamp on its lowest setting, and thank God she'd listened when her scoutmaster said red light doesn't give away your position the way white light does. They walked, Ren following, the man carrying for 83 minutes, 1.7 miles according to the distance Ren estimated based on her pace in the terrain, and then the man stopped. Ren dropped behind a moss-covered boulder and watched. There was a cabin. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by oaks, maybe 50 yards ahead. The structure was old, wooden walls with gaps between the boards, a tin roof orange with rust, one window with no glass, just an empty frame. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Nobody had used this place in years, maybe decades. The man approached the cabin, shouldered the door open, disappeared inside. Ren counted to 30, then moved closer. She found a position behind a fallen log 60 feet from the cabin's front wall. A dense rhododendron bush gave her cover. From here, she could see straight through the empty window frame into the cabin's interior. The man was lighting a lantern, kerosene from the smell. He hung it from a hook in the ceiling. The girl lay on the floor where he'd set her down. She stirred. Ren watched her head turn slightly, watched her hand twitch. She was waking up. The man crouched beside her and said something Ren couldn't hear from this distance. The girl's eyes opened. She tried to sit up. The man pushed her back down, not violently, but firmly, and spoke again. This time Ren heard it. "Don't move." The girl's voice came next, thin, confused, terrified. "Uncle Ryan, where am I? I want my daddy." Uncle. Ren's stomach dropped. She knew him. This wasn't a stranger, this was family, which meant whatever was happening here was worse than Ren had thought. The man Ryan grabbed a length of rope from his backpack. He pulled the girl to a sitting position, dragged over the only piece of furniture in the cabin, a wooden chair, paint peeling, one leg slightly shorter than the others, and forced her into it. She started crying. "You're hurting me. Please, I want to go home." Ryan wrapped the rope around her wrists, pulled it tight behind the chair, wrapped it again around her ankles, binding them to the chair legs. She couldn't move. Then he gagged her, a piece of cloth tied around her mouth, cutting off her voice mid-sob. She could only make muffled sounds now, desperate and small. Ryan stood. He paced. He ran his hands through his hair. And then he started talking. Ren couldn't look away. "You don't understand, do you?" Ryan said. His voice was tight, bitter, like something that had been building pressure for years. "Your daddy, my brother, he ruined my life." He stopped pacing, turned to face the girl. 10 years ago, I had problems. Everyone has problems. I needed help, not judgment. But Marcus, he told our father. Told him I was using drugs. Told him I stole money. Ryan's voice rose. "You know what Dad did? Kicked me out. Disowned me. Cut me out of the will. Everything went to Marcus. The house, the money, the respect. Marcus got the club, got the brotherhood, got everything. His voice dropped lower. And I got nothing. He knelt in front of her. His face was inches from hers. Your daddy took my life, so I'm taking his. The girl shook her head frantically. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Ryan pulled a phone from his pocket. A burner Wren guessed. He held it up. I sent him a message 20 minutes ago. $387,000. 67 hours. That's what I told him. Pay up or she dies. No police or she dies. He stood again, turned away. He thinks he can save you with money. He's wrong. I'm keeping the money and I'm killing you anyway. Because money won't fix what he did to me. Only losing you will make him feel what I felt. Wren's hands went numb. You have 67 hours, Ryan said. His voice was flat now, clinical. That's it. Sunday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Whether he pays or not, you don't go home. And they'll never find you. This cabin's been forgotten for 15 years. By the time they search this deep, you'll be long buried. The girl Sophie Wren thought, though she didn't know her name yet, shook her head behind the gag. Her whole body trembled. Ryan checked his watch. I'm going to check the perimeter, set up some traps, make sure nobody followed me. Don't go anywhere. He laughed at his own joke. Then he left. The lantern stayed burning. Sophie stayed tied to the chair, crying silently, unable to scream. And Wren stayed hidden behind the log, her mind racing. She had her backpack. Inside it, water filter iodine tablets, rope first aid kit, fire starter, knife compass, topographic map, emergency blanket, signal mirror, 6 granola bars, 2 packs of jerky trail mix, enough supplies for 48 hours, which was what her merit badge required. She had skills, fire building, water purification, navigation, tracking, signaling, wilderness first aid. She had a choice. She could run 3 miles back to the trailhead, maybe 90 minutes in the dark if she moved fast. Find help. Call police. Her father was a park ranger. He'd know who to call, how to mobilize search and rescue. But by the time Wren got there, it would be past 11 p.m. By the time police organized a search party for a remote cabin with no trail access, it could be midnight. By the time they found this place, if they found it at all, in 500,000 acres of forest, it could be dawn. And if Ryan heard sirens coming, if he suspected someone had discovered his location, he might move her. Or worse. Wren looked at her hands. They were shaking. She thought about her father's voice, the lessons he drilled into her since she was old enough to walk. Do the right thing, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. She thought about the Girl Scout law. A scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Helpful, brave. She looked at the cabin, at the little girl tied to a chair, crying in the lantern light, and she made her decision. Wren pulled her journal from her pack, the waterproof notebook where she was supposed to document her survival decisions for the merit badge. She wrote 3 sentences by the glow of her red headlamp. I found a kidnapped girl. Her uncle is going to kill her in 67 hours. I'm not leaving her. Then she closed the journal, zipped it into her pack, and began planning. While Wren Brooks was making the choice that would define the next 67 hours of her life, while she was pulling out her topographic map and plotting the markers she would leave to lead searchers to this forgotten cabin, Marcus Carter was 23 miles away in Asheville, discovering that his entire world had just been destroyed. Marcus Reaper Carter stood in his kitchen, holding his phone like it might explode. The text had come through at 8:32 p.m. from a number he didn't recognize. I have Sophie, $387,000, 67 hours, Sunday 2 p.m. deadline. No police or she dies. Instructions follow. His hands shook. The phone screen blurred. Sophie, his daughter, 9 years old, 4th grade, loved purple unicorns and soccer and reading books about horses. She was supposed to be at her friend Emma's house for a sleepover. Marcus had dropped her off himself that afternoon after school, watched her run up the driveway with her overnight bag, waved when she turns to look back at him. That was 6 hours ago. Now his phone was telling him she'd been taken. Marcus called Emma's mother. She answered on the second ring. Hello. Jessica, where's Sophie? A pause. What do you mean she's not there? What do you mean she's not there? I dropped her at your house at 4. Marcus, Sophie never came here. Emma's been asking about her all evening. I thought you'd changed your mind about the sleepover. The world tilted. A man picked her up from school, Jessica said. Her voice was rising now, panicked. Emma saw him. She said it was Sophie's uncle. She said you must have sent him. Uncle. Marcus only had one brother, Ryan. Marcus hung up, dialed 911, told the dispatcher his daughter had been kidnapped, gave them the text, the ransom demand, the timeline. The fact that his brother, Ryan Carter, recently released from prison, was the only person who would call himself Sophie's uncle. Then he made the second call. He dialed Vincent Bear Morrison, president of the Asheville chapter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. The man who'd been Marcus's brother in every way that mattered for the past 15 years. Bear answered on the first ring. Marcus, he took her. Marcus's voice broke. Ryan took Sophie. 3 seconds of silence. Then Bear's voice came back, cold, focused, deadly, calm. I'm making calls. Every chapter within writing systems. We mobilize in 30 minutes. Where are you? Home. Stay there. Police are coming. Cooperate with them. Give them everything. But we're not waiting for police protocols. We're finding your daughter tonight. Bear. She's family, Marcus. That means she's all of ours. We protect our own. Always. The line went dead. Marcus stood in his kitchen, alone, his daughter missing. His brother, the man he testified against 10 years ago, when Ryan had been caught stealing from club members to feed his addiction, had taken the only person in the world Marcus loved more than life itself. And now 127 Hells Angels from 4 states were about to descend on western North Carolina like the wrath of God. 37 minutes later, the first bikes started arriving at Marcus's house. They came in groups, 3, 5, 7 at a time. The rumble of engines shook the windows. Headlights swept across the yard. By 9:30 p.m., there were 42 motorcycles parked in Marcus's driveway and along the street. 42 men in leather cuts with the Winged Death's Head logo on their backs. 42 brothers who dropped everything the moment they heard one of their own needed help. Bear Morrison stood in Marcus's living room like a mountain, 6'4", 280 pounds, gray beard to his chest, arms covered in tattoos that told the story of a life lived hard and survived harder. He was 59 years old and looked like he could break steel with his bare hands. Next to him stood Robert Lawman Hayes, 54, ex-cop, 10 years with the Asheville PD before he'd quit and joined the club because he'd seen too many kids fall through the cracks of a system that valued procedure over protection. Now he handled legal coordination for the chapter. Made sure they stayed on the right side of the line even when every instinct screamed to cross it. Police have the text, Lawman said. He had a tablet open, mapping software displayed across the screen. They're treating this as a kidnapping. FBI has been notified. Amber Alert is going out. They're organizing search teams. How long until they mobilize? Bear asked. Officially 6 to 8 hours. They need to coordinate with park rangers, search and rescue, establish command post brief teams. We don't have 6 to 8 hours. I know. Bear turned to Marcus. Your brother. Where would he go? Marcus had been thinking about nothing else for the past 90 minutes. Ryan knows these mountains, he said. Dad used to take us camping when we were kids, before everything went to hell, before the drugs, before I had to choose between my brother and what was right. His voice was steady, but barely. There are old cabins up in Pisgah, hunting camps from the 70s. Most of them are abandoned now, forgotten. If Ryan wanted to hide somewhere nobody would find him, that's where he'd go. Bear nodded, turned to the room full of bikers. We divide into search teams, 5 men each. We've got 87 brothers here now. More coming, that's 17 teams. Lawman coordinates with police. We share information. We follow their rules, but we don't wait for them. A younger biker near the back, maybe 27 tattoos up his neck, spoke up. Why follow rules? Ryan Carter took a kid. We find him, we handle it our way. Bear's eyes went cold. You're new chains, so I'm going to explain this once. We are not vigilantes. We are not criminals. We are brothers who protect people who can't protect themselves. That 9-year-old girl deserves justice, real justice, not revenge. We find her, we save her, we let the law handle Ryan. Because if we cross that line, we become what people already think we are. And we're better than that. You understand? Chains nodded. Yes, sir. Good. Now gear up. We ride in 15 minutes. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Men checking phones, pulling up maps, organizing into teams, moving with military precision because half of them were veterans and the other half had learned discipline the hard way. Lawman pulled Bear aside. Detective Lauren Shepard is lead on this. Asheville PD, she's good. I worked with her when I was on the force. She'll coordinate with us if we play nice. Then we play nice. And if we find Ryan before they do, Bear was quiet for 3 seconds. We secure him, we secure Sophie, and we call it in, no exceptions. At 10:17 p.m. Thursday night, 127 Hells Angels on 87 motorcycles rolled out into the darknesses of western North Carolina. They moved in formation, headlights cutting through the night like search beams. They had maps. They had radios. They had a phone tree that connected every rider to every other rider, and they had a single mission. Find Sophie Carter. Bring her home. Whatever it takes. While Marcus Carter and the Hells Angels were organizing the largest civilian search operation Asheville had seen in a decade, while Detective Lauren Shepard was setting up a command post and coordinating with the FBI, while Garrett Brooks was being notified by Park Dispatch that his daughter might have gone missing because she'd failed to check in at the designated time, though, he told them she was fine, she was skilled, give her until morning. Ryan Carter sat in the abandoned cabin and counted money. $87,000. That's what he had in his backpack. His entire life savings. 10 years of working construction jobs under the table because no legitimate employer would hire an ex-con with a drug record. 10 years of living in a studio apartment that smelled like mold and defeat. 10 years of watching his brother Marcus rise higher and higher while Ryan stayed exactly where he'd always been. At the bottom, he looked at Sophie, still tied to the chair, still gagged. Eyes closed now, exhausted from crying. She looked like Marcus. Same nose, same stubborn set to her jaw. Ryan felt nothing when he looked at her. No guilt, no remorse, just cold calculation. Marcus had taken everything from Ryan. Their father's respect, the inheritance, the family business, the brotherhood of the club. All of it gone because Marcus had decided 10 years ago that blood wasn't thicker than rules. Now Ryan would take everything from Marcus, and he'd get rich doing it. The insurance policy had been the clever part. Ryan had forged Marcus's signature 3 weeks ago, applied for a $250,000 life insurance policy on Sophie Carter, listed himself as beneficiary, used a burner phone and a P.O. box, paid the first premium in cash. In 3 more weeks, once the contestability period ended, that policy would be unbreakable. But Ryan couldn't wait 3 weeks. He'd run out of money, run out of time, run out of patience. So he'd moved up the timeline. Kidnap Sophie. Demand ransom. Marcus couldn't possibly raise in 67 hours. Kill her Sunday afternoon whether the ransom was paid or not. Collect the insurance money 6 weeks later after the police investigation went cold. It was perfect. Almost. The only variable Ryan hadn't accounted for was that he'd done this before. 8 years ago. His wife Rebecca. Sweet Rebecca, who'd believed him when he said he'd quit using. Who'd believed him when he said he loved her. Who died of what the death certificate called complications from pneumonia, but what was actually antifreeze poisoning administered slowly over 3 weeks. Ryan had collected $180,000 from that policy. He'd been careful then. He'd be careful now. Nobody suspected. Nobody knew. He checked his watch. 10:43 p.m., 64 hours and 17 minutes until Sunday at 2 p.m. Ryan pulled a sleeping bag from his pack, laid it on the floor near the door, used his backpack as a pillow. He looked at Sophie one more time. Sleep tight, he said. Then he turned down the lantern until it was just a flicker and closed his eyes. He didn't know that 3 miles away, his brother was leading the largest manhunt in North Carolina history. He didn't know that 127 Hells Angels were systematically searching every square mile of Pisgah National Forest. And he absolutely didn't know that 60 feet outside his cabin, hidden behind a fallen log and a wall of rhododendron, a 12-year-old girl named Wren Brooks was watching him through the window with the kind of determination that only comes from making a promise you intend to keep. no matter what it costs. Friday morning broke cold and clear over Pisgah National Forest. Wren had not slept. She'd spent the night watching the cabin, watching Ryan's shadow move occasionally inside, watching the lantern burn down to nothing around 4 a.m., watching the first gray light of dawn filter through the trees. She'd also spent the night planning. At 11 p.m. Thursday, after Ryan had finally gone to sleep, Wren had backtracked from her observation post. She'd spent 2 hours marking a trail. Every 50 yards, she left a sign. A branch broken at eye level, the break pointing northeast toward the cabin. 3 rocks stacked in a cairn, the top rock pointing north. Bark stripped from a tree in a long, vertical scar like a blaze on a hiking trail. She'd worked for 100 minutes, extended the marked trail a quarter mile toward the Deep Creek trailhead. When rescue came and Wren refused to believe, if meant failure and failure meant Sophie died, they would follow these markers straight to the cabin. By 1 a.m. Friday, Wren was back at her observation post. She ate 1 granola bar, drank a quarter of her water bottle, tried to think. She couldn't approach the cabin while Ryan was inside. He would hear. And even if Wren was quiet, what could she do? She was 12 years old and weighed 92 pounds. Ryan was an adult. If Wren tried to fight, she'd lose. So Wren waited. At 6:30 Friday morning, Ryan woke, stretched, left the cabin. Wren watched him walk toward the stream, 200 yards east. He carried an empty water bottle. The moment he disappeared into the trees, Wren moved. She'd noticed something the night before. A loose floorboard on the southeast corner of the cabin's exterior wall, visible where the wood had rotted away from the foundation. Wren knelt, lifted the board, found an 18-inch gap between the ground and the underside of the cabin floor. She could fit. Wren crawled beneath the cabin, dirt cold against her stomach, spiderwebs catching in her hair. She moved toward the center of the structure, directly beneath where Sophie sat tied to the chair. The floorboards above her had gaps, inch-wide spaces between planks, enough to see through, enough to reach through if she was careful. Wren pressed her face close to a gap and whispered, "Hey." Sophie's head jerked up. "Down here. Don't make a sound." Sophie looked down, saw Wren's eye peering up through the gap. Her eyes went wide. And that's where we came in. That's the moment this story truly began. Not with the kidnapping, not with the ransom demand, but with a 12-year-old girl making a promise to a 9-year-old she'd never met. "I won't leave you." After Wren replaced Sophie's gag and scrambled back out from under the cabin after Ryan returned, and never suspected a thing, Wren spent Friday morning expanding her trail markers. She worked systematically, moving in careful arcs around the cabin, making sure that anyone searching from the north, east, or west would eventually intersect one of her marked paths. By noon Friday, she'd covered nearly a mile of forest with signs that screamed, "Someone is here. Look, this way, follow me." She also built her first signal fire. There was a ridgeline 600 yards east of the cabin, highest point within a mile. Wren hiked to it at 10 a.m., gathered armloads of green pine boughs and damp leaves, constructed a fire that would produce thick white smoke visible for miles. She lit it at noon when searchers would be most likely to see it. The smoke column rose 400 feet, thick, white, unmistakable. At 2:14 p.m., a search and rescue helicopter passed overhead. Wren stood on the ridge, arms raised above her head, waving her bright orange rain jacket, the one piece of gear she'd kept on herself. She looked like a distress signal, because that's exactly what she was. The helicopter circled, 2 miles south of Wren's position. The pilot saw the smoke. Wren was sure of it, but the helicopter didn't come closer. It moved on. Wren realized later what had happened. The searchers knew she was out here completing her merit badge test. They saw the smoke. They assumed it was her survival campfire, part of the test. They dismissed it as non-urgent. That mistake would haunt the search coordinator for months. But at 2:14 p.m. Friday afternoon, Wren didn't know any of that. She just watched the helicopter fly away and felt her stomach sink. At 2:30 p.m., she returned to her observation post. Ryan was inside the cabin. Sophie was still tied to the chair. Wren pulled out her signal mirror, a 3x3-inch piece of polished metal with a sighting hole in the center. Standard issue in every Girl Scout survival kit. She positioned herself on the ridge and began flashing SOS toward the highway 8 miles north. ... dash, 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 ... 5-second pause, repeat. She flashed for 90 minutes straight. Her arm ached, Her eyes burned from squinting through the sighting hole at the sun's reflection. Nobody responded. At 5 p.m., the rain started. October in the Blue Ridge Mountains is unpredictable. The forecast had called for a 40% chance of showers. What arrived instead was a cold, soaking storm that turned the forest floor into mud and dropped the temperature to 39 degrees. Wren's lean-to shelter, the one she'd built Thursday afternoon, kept her mostly dry. But she worried about Sophie. The cabin's roof had holes. Water dripped through onto the floor. Through the window, Wren could see Sophie shivering. At 6:30 p.m., Ryan left the cabin again. Wren timed it. 30 minutes. He always took 30 minutes when he went to the stream. Wren moved fast. She crawled under the cabin, emerged through the floorboard gap, found Sophie in worse shape than before. She was soaked. Her lips had a blue tint. Her whole body shook. Wren removed the gag. "You're hypothermic," she said. It wasn't a question. Her wilderness first aid training had covered this. Blue lips, violent shivering, confusion. These were early signs. Sophie tried to speak but couldn't. Her teeth chattered too hard. Wren made a decision she knew would cost her later. She took off her fleece jacket, the one that had kept her warm through 2 nights in the forest, and draped it over Sophie's shoulders. Sophie couldn't put her arms through the sleeves because she was tied, but the warmth helped. She stopped shaking as much. Wren gave her the last granola bar, the last piece of jerky, most of her remaining water. "Move your fingers and toes," Wren told her. "Wiggle them. Keep blood flowing. Can you do that?" Sophie nodded. "It's Friday evening," Wren said. "You've been here 24 hours. Tomorrow is Saturday. Sunday afternoon is when he said." "Right. Yes. Help is coming. I know it. My dad, he's a park ranger. He's out there searching. Your dad, he's out there. They're going to find you. And if they don't by Sunday morning, I'm cutting you loose and we're running. I know how to navigate at night. We can make it to the trail. Deal?" "Deal." Sophie's voice was stronger now. "Wren, thank you. If you weren't here, I'd be—" "You'd survive," Wren said. "You're tough, I can tell. But you're not alone. I promised I wouldn't leave. I keep my promises." She replaced the gag, slipped back under the cabin, disappeared into the woods. By the time Ryan returned, Wren was back behind the log, shivering in the rain without her jacket, eating her last handful of trail mix. She had no food left, no warm layers. 41 hours remained before Ryan's deadline, and Wren still hadn't slept. At noon Friday, while Wren was building her signal fire and watching it be dismissed as a harmless campfire, Marcus Carter stood in a command post tent 3 miles south of the cabin he didn't know existed yet. Detective Lawrence Shepard had organized the operation with military efficiency. Maps covered every surface. Radio chatter filled the air. Search teams checked in every 30 minutes. The Hells Angels had integrated with official search operations better than anyone expected. Bear Morrison had made it clear from minute one. "We follow your lead. We share information. We want the same thing you want, to bring that little girl home." Detective Shepard had been skeptical at first, but after watching the bikers coordinate search grids with the precision of trained professionals, after seeing Lawman Hayes cross-reference their findings with FBI databases, after hearing the discipline in their radio calls, she'd become a believer. "Your people are good," she told Bear at noon Friday. "We protect our own," Bear said. "Sophie's one of ours." Marcus stood at the edge of the tent, silent. He'd been searching for 16 hours straight. His eyes were red. His hands shook from exhaustion and adrenaline. Lawman approached him. "You need rest." "I need my daughter." "I know, but you're no good to her if you collapse. 20 minutes. Close your eyes. I'll wake you if anything happens." Marcus shook his head. "I can't. Every minute I'm not searching is a minute she's—" "We have 140 people searching," Lawman said. "Police rangers, volunteers, brothers. You're not failing her by taking 20 minutes. Marcus wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. He sat, closed his eyes, and for exactly 17 minutes he slept. He woke to Lawman shaking at his shoulder. "We found something." Marcus was on his feet instantly. "What?" Ryan's car, hidden point 3 miles from Deep Creek trailhead, covered with branches. "We almost missed it." Detective Shepard joined them. She had an evidence bag. "Trunk was unlocked," she said. "Look at this." Inside the bag, detailed topographical maps of Pisgah National Forest. 3 different sections circled in red, handwritten notes in the margins. Water sources, cabin locations, trail access points. A second bag held receipts. Sleeping pills purchased 3 weeks ago from a pharmacy in Greenville. Rope, duct tape, a burner phone. He planned this, Shepard said. This wasn't impulsive. He studied the terrain, identified potential hiding spots, purchased supplies in advance. Marcus felt sick. My daughter's school schedule is in there too, he said. He'd seen it. A printed calendar with Sophie's pickup time highlighted. He watched her, Shepard said. Learned her routine. This is premeditated kidnapping with intent. She looked at Marcus. FBI is escalating this to priority 1. Every available resource is being deployed. We're going to find her. But as Friday afternoon bled into evening, as the rain started and the temperature dropped, as 67 search personnel combed through hundreds of square miles of forest, they found nothing. No sign of Sophie, no sign of Ryan, just trees and rain and growing darkness. At 8 p.m. Friday night, 37 hours after Sophie was taken, Bear Morrison made a decision. He called in reinforcements. This is Bear, he said into his phone. He was calling every Hell's Angels chapter from Virginia to Georgia. We need bodies. We need lights. We need people who know how to search at night. Marcus Carter's daughter is out there somewhere, and we're running out of time. By 10 p.m. Friday, an additional 40 motorcycles had arrived. By midnight, the number was 83, 127 Hell's Angels, all told. They brought portable generators, floodlights, thermal imaging equipment borrowed from members who work search and rescue in their civilian lives. And they brought something else, hope, because these were men who understood what it meant to be loyal, to show up when showing up was hard, to keep searching when everyone else had gone home. Marcus stood in the rain at 12:17 a.m. Saturday morning and watched his brothers arrive one by one. He didn't have words. He didn't need them. Bear put a hand on his shoulder. We're not stopping, Bear said. Not until we bring her home. And 3 miles away, hidden behind a fallen log in the darkness, soaked to the bone and shivering without her jacket, a 12-year-old girl named Wren Brooks made the exact same promise to herself. I'm not stopping, not until I bring her home. Because that's what you do when you give your word. You keep it, no matter what it costs. Sunday morning arrived with frost on the ground and desperation in Wren's chest. She'd slept maybe 4 hours total over the past 60 hours. Her body was running on adrenaline and stubborn determination, and the kind of clarity that comes when a 12-year-old decides that keeping a promise matters more than her own comfort. She'd eaten the last of her trail mix Saturday night. Her water was gone. Her fleece jacket was wrapped around a girl she'd never met before Thursday. And in approximately 7 hours, Ryan Carter planned to kill his niece and bury her body somewhere in 500,000 acres of forest where she would never be found. Wren had one advantage Ryan didn't know about. For 2.5 days, Wren had been invisible, a ghost moving through the forest like smoke, leaving markers, building fires, signaling for help, keeping Sophie alive with smuggled food and water. And Ryan had never once suspected anyone was watching. He'd checked his perimeter. He'd set trap lines of fishing wire strung between trees at ankle height to detect intruders. He'd scanned the woods every time he left the cabin, but he'd never look for a 12-year-old girl with a Girl Scout's training and a ranger's daughter's patience. That was about to change everything. At 6 a.m. Sunday, Wren made her way back to the ridge for what she hoped wouldn't be the last time. Her hands shook as she gathered wood. Not from cold, though the temperature had dropped to 41 degrees overnight, but from exhaustion. Her vision blurred at the edges. She'd read about this in her wilderness survival manual. Sleep deprivation. The body shutting down non-essential systems to preserve energy for critical functions. She had maybe 6 more hours before her judgment started failing. Maybe 12 before she collapsed entirely. She didn't need 12 hours. She needed 2. Wren built the biggest fire of her life. She used every technique her father had taught her. Started with a teepee structure, small kindling in the center, progressively larger sticks leaning inward. Added tinder made from dry pine needles and birch bark she'd kept in a waterproof bag. Struck her magnesium fire starter until sparks caught. Blew gently until flames took hold. Then she fed it. Dry oak branches for heat. green pine boughs for smoke, wet leaves for thickness, moss torn from rocks still damp from yesterday's rain, creating dense white columns that billowed up and up and up. By 7 a.m., the smoke column rose 600 feet into the clear morning sky. Wren stood on the highest point of the ridge, arms raised above her head, waving her bright orange rain jacket. She looked like a distress signal, because that's exactly what she was, and this time someone saw her. Captain Jennifer Shaw had been flying search and rescue missions for Asheville County for 11 years. She'd found lost hikers, crashed planes, missing children. She'd searched this forest dozens of times, and she knew what a normal campfire looked like versus what a signal fire looked like. This was a signal fire. "Command, this is Eagle 2. Her voice crackled over the radio at 7:03 a.m. "I have visual on large smoke column, coordinates approximately 35.354 north, 82.773 west. That's not a normal campfire. That's a signal fire." She banked the helicopter north, climbing to get a better view. "Command, I also have mirror signal, SOS pattern, rhythmic, deliberate. Someone needs help up there." The radio crackled back. "Eagle 2, you're in quadrant November Echo 47. That's 3 miles outside primary search zone for the Carter girl." "Copy that, but I've got a person on the ridge waving both arms, requesting permission to investigate." "Permission granted. Proceed with caution." Captain Shaw pushed the helicopter forward. 60 seconds later, she was hovering 200 feet above Wren Brooks. Through her binoculars, she could see clearly. A kid, maybe 12 or 13, wearing a Girl Scout uniform shirt under an orange rain jacket, standing next to a fire that was putting out enough smoke to be visible from the next county. The kid was pointing down the slope, northeast, towards something Shaw couldn't see through the tree canopy. Shaw flipped to thermal imaging. "Command, I have one heat signature on ridge. Appears to be young female. Scanning area now." She adjusted the camera angle, sweeping the forest below the ridge. "There." "Command, I've got a structure 400 meters northeast of the ridge. Looks like an old cabin. And I'm reading 2 heat signatures inside. Repeat, 2 heat signatures, one larger, one smaller." Static, then a different voice. Male, urgent. "Eagle 2, this is Sergeant Holloway, Asheville PD. Can you confirm 2 heat signatures?" "Confirmed, 1 adult-sized, 1 child-sized." 3 seconds of silence. Then the radio exploded. All units. Possible location of missing Carter girl. Coordinates 35.3547 north, 82.7729 west. Abandoned cabin. Air unit has confirmed 2 heat signatures inside. Ground teams converge immediately. Repeat, and all teams converge on coordinates. Captain Shaw looked down at the kid on the ridge again. The girl was still pointing, still waving. Shaw keyed her mic. "Command, the girl on the ridge. I think she's trying to tell us something. She's gesturing toward the cabin." "Copy. Can you make contact?" Shaw dropped the helicopter lower, switching to the external loudspeaker. "Hello, can you hear me?" The girl's head snapped up. She nodded frantically. "Are you Wren Brooks?" Another nod. "Your fathers have been looking for you. Is there someone in that cabin who needs help?" The girl didn't just nod this time. She held up both hands, fingers spread wide. Then she made a cutting motion across her throat, then pointed at the cabin again. The message was clear. "Someone down there is in danger. Hurry." Shaw radioed it in. "Command, the Brooks girl is indicating immediate threat at the cabin. Recommend emergency response." "Copy. Ground teams ETA 12 minutes. Hold position." 12 minutes. Shaw watched the girl collapse to her knees, head in her hands, exhausted, relieved. She'd done it. Whatever she'd done, however long she'd been out here, she'd gotten help. Now it was up to the ground teams. 3 miles south, Garrett Brooks was running. He'd been searching for 52 hours straight. First for Sophie Carter, the missing 9-year-old whose father had called 911 Thursday night, screaming that his daughter had been taken. Then starting Friday at 3 p.m., when Wren hadn't shown up at the trailhead for her scheduled check-in for his own daughter. Garrett had been torn between 2 kinds of fear. Professional fear, the kind that comes from 18 years as a park ranger knowing exactly how many ways someone can die in these mountains. And parental fear, the kind that makes your hands shake when you imagine your child hurt, lost, alone, when the coordinates came through. When he heard girl on ridge in Girl Scout uniform, something in his chest unlocked. Ren was alive, and somehow Garrett didn't understand how yet didn't have time to process it. Somehow Ren had found the Carter girl. He keyed his radio. "This is Ranger Brooks. That's my daughter on the ridge. I'm coming in from the south. ETA 10 minutes. He ran. Behind him, 7 other search team members followed. They crashed through underbrush, jumped over lawns, navigated the rough terrain with the efficiency of people who'd spent their careers in these woods. At the same time from the north, 14 Hells Angels were converging. Marcus Carter had assembled every brother within riding distance. The Asheville chapter. The Charlotte chapter 2 hours away. Independent riders who'd heard the call and dropped everything to help. They'd been searching in organized grid patterns since Thursday night, coordinating with police and search and rescue, but operating on their own discipline. Their own brotherhood code that said, when one of yours is in trouble, you respond. Marcus's group had been 3 miles northwest when the radio call came through. They moved fast, boots pounding dirt, leather jackets flashing between trees, men in their 40s and 50s running like they were 20 years younger, because a little girl's life was at stake. From the east and west, police units closed in, 6 officers, weapons drawn, because the 911 call from Thursday had mentioned kidnapping and the helicopter had mentioned 2 heat signatures, and nobody knew yet what they were walking into. By 7:41 a.m., 28 people surrounded the cabin, and Ryan Carter inside heard them coming. Ryan had been sleeping when the helicopter passed overhead. The sound woke him, that distinctive thwop, thwop, thwop of rotor blades cutting air. He scrambled to the window, looked up through the canopy, saw it. A search and rescue helicopter, hovering, not moving on, hovering. His stomach dropped. They'd found him, but how? This cabin was off every map. No trails led here. He'd been so careful. He'd checked for followers. He'd covered his tracks. The radio chatter started. Faint. Multiple voices. North side, south side, east perimeter secure. Ryan ran to Sophie, still tied to the chair, still gagged. Her eyes were wide with terror. Or hope. He couldn't tell. He grabbed her by the shoulders. "If they come in," he hissed. "If they try to take you, I'll kill you before they reach the door. You understand?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Ryan pulled a knife from his pocket, a folding blade. 4 inches, lockback. He'd brought it for cutting rope. He held it up so she could see. "I swear to God, I'll..." Ryan Carter. The voice came from outside, amplified, authoritative. "This is Asheville Police. Exit the cabin with your hands up, now." Ryan's hands shook. He looked at the knife, at Sophie, at the door. He'd planned this for 10 years. 10 years of imagining how Marcus would feel when his daughter disappeared. 10 years of fantasizing about revenge. And now it was falling apart. "I have the girl," he shouted toward the door. "You come in, I kill her." Silence. 5 seconds. 10. Then a different sound. Boots on wood. Not from the door, from the side wall. The door exploded inward. Not kicked. Slammed. The old hinges gave way instantly. Marcus Carter came through like a storm, 6'2" and 220 pounds of pure focused rage. And behind him, 2 more men, 1 on each side. Ryan tried to turn, tried to bring the knife towards Sophie. He didn't make it. Marcus hit him like a linebacker. Drove him backward into the wall so hard the boards cracked. The knife fell. Ryan's head bounced off the wood. Marcus's hands were around his throat, lifting him, slamming him again. "That's my daughter," Marcus said. His voice was low, deadly. "You touch her, you die." The other 2 men, one older with a gray beard and arms like tree trunks, one younger with a tattooed neck and a face cold as stone, grabbed Ryan's arms, wrenched them behind his back. Metal handcuffs clicked, shut. Ryan's face scraped the floor as they forced him down. His arms twisted at angles that made him gasp. Someone's knee drove into his spine. "Don't move," Abukis said. "Don't breathe wrong. Don't give me a reason." Police poured in through the broken door, weapons drawn, commands shouted, but the Hells Angels had already secured Ryan, already neutralized the threat, and Marcus was already at Sophie's side. He pulled the gag from her mouth first. She gasped, coughed, sucked in air like she'd been underwater. "Daddy," she whispered, "I got you, baby." Marcus's hands shook as he pulled out a pocket knife, his own, not Ryan's, and cut the ropes around her wrists, around her ankles. The ropes fell away. Sophie tried to stand. Her legs buckled. She'd been tied in that position for 60 hours. Her circulation was shot. Her muscles were cramped. She couldn't hold her own weight. Marcus caught her, swept her into his arms like she weighed nothing. "I got you," he said again. "You're safe. I got you." Sophie's arms went around his neck. She buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed. Huge racking sobs that came from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been holding terror for 3 days and could finally let it go. "Ren told me you'd come," she said between sobs. "Ren said you were looking for me. She promised. She kept me alive, Daddy. She gave me food and water. She talked to me. She said help was coming." Marcus froze. "Who's Ren?" A voice from the doorway answered, young, exhausted, shy. "I am." Everyone turned. Ren Brooks stood in the doorway, tiny, 12 years old, 5'1" and 92 pounds, covered in mud and pine needles. Her Girl Scout uniform was torn at one elbow. Her orange rain jacket was streaked with dirt. Her eyes were red-rimmed from no sleep. Her hands trembled. She looked like she might collapse at any moment. Sophie's face lit up. "Ren." Marcus stood slowly, still holding Sophie, and turned to face this kid who'd somehow done what 165 trained searchers hadn't been able to do. "You're the scout," Marcus said. Not a question, a statement. Understanding dawning. Ren nodded. "I was camping for my merit badge. I saw him take her Thursday night. I followed him here. I couldn't get help fast enough. So I stayed. I left trail markers, broken branches, stacked rocks. I built signal fires. I brought her food and water every time he left. I tried to..." Her voice broke, exhaustion and emotion hitting her all at once. "I'm sorry I couldn't get her out sooner. I tried. I tried to signal earlier, but nobody saw, and I didn't want to leave her alone. Because what if he..." Marcus held up one hand. "Stop." He stepped forward, knelt down so he was eye level with Ren, put both hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me," Marcus said. His voice was rough, raw. "You tracked a kidnapper for 3 days. You left trail markers that led us straight here. You kept my daughter alive. You didn't run to safety. You stayed when you could have left." His voice cracked. "You're 12 years old. You saved her life. Do you understand me? You saved my daughter's life." Ren's face crumpled. The tears came. Adrenaline crash, exhaustion, relief, all of it hitting at once. "I promised her I wouldn't leave," she whispered. "Scouts keep their promises." Marcus pulled her into a hug, this giant biker, arms like iron, holding this tiny kid like she was made of glass. "You're a sister now," Marcus said quietly. "You understand Hell's Angels. We protect our own. You protected mine. Your family." Behind them, Sophie was crying again, happy tears this time. And Garrett Brooks, who'd just run the last 400 yards up from the trail and arrived in time to see his daughter being hugged by a Hell's Angel, felt something in his chest that was equal parts pride and terror and overwhelming gratitude that his kid was alive. The helicopter medic reached Sophie first. Her name was Dr. Patricia Brennan, 15 years with search and rescue, seen everything. But when she assessed Sophie Carter's condition, her face went tight. "Severe dehydration," she said, checking Sophie's pulse, her skin elasticity, her capillary refill time, mild hypothermia, rope burns on wrists and ankles, psychological trauma. She needs IV fluids immediately and a hospital evaluation. She looked at Marcus. "You got her just in time. Another 12 hours without water." She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Marcus's jaw clenched. He looked at Ryan Carter, now face down on the cabin floor with 3 officers surrounding him, being read his Miranda rights. "Take care of my daughter," Marcus said to Brennan. "Please." "I will." Dr. Brennan turned to Ren. "You two scout. Let me check you out." Ren shook her head. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're exhausted and dehydrated and probably hypothermic yourself. When's the last time you ate?" "Saturday night trail mix. Before that, Friday morning, jerky." Dr. Brennan looked at Garrett. Your daughter gave most of her food and water to the victim, didn't she? Garrett nodded slowly, the realization settling over him. Yeah, she did. DeBrennan checked Ren's vitals. Pulse elevated, blood pressure low, core temperature 96.8 degrees. Not critical, but below normal, hands shaking from exhaustion. You need food, water, warmth, and sleep, in that order. Hospital. Ren shook her head. Just let me sleep. Hospital, Garrett said firmly. Both of you. He looked at Marcus. They can share a room if the hospital allows it. I think these two need to stick together for a while. Marcus nodded. Agreed. The helicopter lifted off at 7:52 a.m. with Sophie, Ren, Marcus, and Garrett aboard. Dr. Brennan stayed with them, monitoring IV fluids dripping into Sophie's arm, making sure Ren drank water slowly so she didn't make herself sick. On the ground, police were processing the scene. Ryan Carter was hauled to his feet, hands cuffed behind his back. 3 officers surrounding him. They walked him out of the cabin and toward the main trail where police vehicles were waiting. As they passed the first Hells Angel Bear Morrison, the Asheville chapter president, 59 years old, arms crossed, face like granite. Ryan made the mistake of speaking. This isn't over, he muttered. Marcus thinks he won, but this isn't. Bear stepped forward, not threatening, just present. 6'4", 280 pounds, beard to his chest. Eyes that had seen every kind of stupid the world had to offer. It is over, Bear said quietly. You're going to prison for kidnapping. A federal charge, felony assault, attempted murder, child endangerment. You're looking at 30 years minimum. Your brother's daughter is safe, and that 12-year-old you never knew was watching you. She beat you. A kid with a Girl Scout handbook beat you. Ryan's face went pale. Bear leaned in slightly, voice dropping even lower. And if you ever get out, if you ever even think about coming near Sophie or Marcus or anyone in this family again, you won't deal with police. You'll deal with us. Every chapter from here to California knows your face now. You understand? Ryan didn't respond. I asked if you understand. Yes. Good. The officers walked him away. Lawman Hayes, 54, ex-cop, the brother who handled legal coordination, watched them go. Then he turned to the rest of the assembled bikers and police officers. Textbook arrest, he said. Miranda rights read on scene, multiple witnesses, physical evidence secured, no excessive force, no vigilante justice. He looked toward where Marcus had been standing moments before, already gone in the helicopter. Marcus handled it exactly right. Immobilized the threat, protected the victim, let police make the arrest. One of the younger officers, couldn't have been more than 25, looked at Lawman with something like awe. You guys, that was the most disciplined entry I've ever seen. Military precision. Lawman nodded. That's what we train for. Control, discipline, protection, not chaos. Another officer, older, shook his head slowly. When we got the call Thursday night, when we heard Hells Angels were mobilizing to search, some of us expected, well, not this. You expected violence, Bear said, not a question. The officer nodded. We don't do violence for violence's sake, Bear said. We do what's necessary to protect people who can't protect themselves. Today, what was necessary was finding a little girl, securing a kidnapper, and making sure a 12-year-old hero didn't die of hypothermia in the woods. That's what we did. Detective Lauren Shepard approached. She'd been coordinating the ground response. 37 years old, Asheville PD, sharp eyes, sharper mind. I owe you an apology, she said to Bear. For what? I doubted you Thursday night when you showed up with 100 bikers. I thought this was going to turn into a circus. I was wrong. Your people were professional, disciplined. You shared information, followed protocols, worked with us instead of against us. Bear extended his hand. She shook it. We're not what people think we are, Bear said. Most days anyway. Shepard almost smiled. Most days. She looked toward the cabin. Forensics teams were already inside, photographing, collecting evidence. We found something else, she said. In Ryan's backpack, insurance documents, a policy on Sophie Carter, $250,000, taken out 3 weeks ago, forged signature. Bear's expression darkened. He was going to kill her and collect. Yes, and we found older documents too, from 2011, Rebecca Carter, Ryan's ex-wife, life insurance policy, 180,000. She died of what the certificate says was pneumonia. Shepard pulled out her phone, showed Bear a photo of a yellowed newspaper clipping. We're reopening that investigation because I don't believe in coincidences. And I especially don't believe Ryan Carter when he claims 2 wives, 2 insurance policies, 2 suspicious deaths. You think he killed Rebecca too? I think we're about to find out. At Mission Hospital, Asheville, Sophie Carter and Ren Brooks were admitted to the pediatric wing at 9:17 a.m. Sunday morning. The staff tried to put them in separate rooms. Sophie started crying. Ren refused to leave her side. Garrett and Marcus looked at each other and said simultaneously, "Let them stay together." So the nurses pushed 2 beds close. Separated by a curtain, they could pull back if privacy was needed, and let these 2 kids who'd survived 3 days of hell recover in the same space. Sophie was hooked up to an IV. 2 bags of fluids dripped steadily into her arm, rehydrating her slowly so she didn't go into shock. Her wrists and ankles were bandaged where the ropes had cut into her skin. She wore a hospital gown that was too big. And one of the nurses had found a stuffed rabbit in the pediatric wing and given it to her. She clutched it like a lifeline. Ren was in the other bed, also on an IV, also being rehydrated. She'd refused food at first. Her stomach was too tight, too knotted with leftover adrenaline. But eventually she managed to eat half a turkey sandwich and some apple juice. The hospital had given her clean clothes. Someone from her Girl Scout troop had brought her duffel bag from home. She wore sweatpants and a t-shirt that said Troop 47 across the chest. She'd slept for 6 hours straight, the deepest, hardest sleep of her life. When she woke up at 4 p.m., the first thing she did was look over at Sophie to make sure she was still there, still safe. Sophie was awake, looking at her. "Hey," Sophie said. "Hey, you kept your promise." Ren's throat tightened. "I said I would." "I know, but," Sophie looked down at the stuffed rabbit. "I didn't think anyone would really stay. I thought you'd go get help, and maybe they'd find me, but maybe they wouldn't, and I'd be alone." "You weren't alone," Ren said. "That was the promise, that you wouldn't be alone." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. Thank you for not leaving me. Thank you for the food and the water and the jacket." She touched her shoulder where Ren's fleece had been draped. Someone had returned it to Ren, washed and folded. It sat on the chair next to her bed. "Thank you for telling me my dad would come. You were right." Ren nodded. "He'd go through fire for you, I could tell." "He did," Sophie said softly. "He went through 3 days of not knowing where I was. That's worse than fire." The door opened. Marcus walked in, followed by Garrett. Both men looked exhausted. Marcus from 60 hours of terror and searching. Garrett from 52 hours of searching for both Sophie and his own daughter. But both wore expressions of relief so profound it was almost painful to see. Marcus went straight to Sophie's bedside, checked her IV, adjusted her blanket, kissed her forehead. "How you feeling, baby?" "Better. Tired. My wrists hurt." "I know. The doctor said they'll heal. No permanent damage. Just needs time. And Ren gave me her jacket so I didn't get too cold. And her food. She gave me all her food, Dad." Marcus looked across at Ren. Garrett was already there, one hand on his daughter's shoulder. Marcus walked over, pulled a chair close, sat down. For a moment, he just looked at Ren. This kid who was 12 years old and small for her age and looked like a strong wind could knock her over. This kid who tracked a kidnapper through the forest and kept a hostage alive and built signal fires and left trail markers and never once thought about her own safety, only about keeping a promise to a little girl she'd never met. "Ren," Marcus said, "I need you to understand something. What you did, tracking Ryan, staying with Sophie, keeping her alive for 3 days, that wasn't luck. That wasn't coincidence. That was training and skill and courage." He leaned forward. "You made decisions that most adults couldn't make. You stayed when running would have been easier. You sacrificed your food, your warmth, your safety for someone else." His voice roughened. "In my world, in the Hell's Angels, we have a code. We protect our own. We stand up when everyone else sits down. We do what needs to be done even when it's hard. You did that. You lived that code, and you're not even one of us." Marcus reached into his jacket. He pulled out a folded piece of leather, unfolded it carefully. It was a vest, a miniature Hell's Angels cut, kid-sized, with the Winged Death's head logo on the back and a patch on the front that said honorary member. "This doesn't make you a Hell's Angel," Marcus said. "You're 12, you've got your own path. But it means something. It means every brother in every chapter knows your name and knows what you did. It means if you ever need help anywhere in the country, you call us and we come. It means you're protected. Forever." He held it out. Ren stared at it. I can't take that." "You can, and you will, because you earned it." Ren looked at her father. Garrett nodded, eyes wet. "Take it, little bird. He's right. You earned it." Ren took the vest with shaking hands. She held it like it was made of glass. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," Marcus said. "Thank you. You gave me my daughter back. There's no way to repay that, but we're going to treat it." Outside the hospital room, Detective Shepard was making phone calls. The first was to the medical examiner's office in Greenville, South Carolina. "This is Detective Shepard, Asheville PD. I need you to pull a death certificate from 2011. Rebecca Ann Carter, cause of death listed as complications from pneumonia. I'm requesting exhumation and full autopsy. Suspected homicide." The second call was to the FBI. "This is Shepard. We've got Ryan Carter in custody, federal kidnapping charge, but I think we've got something bigger. Insurance fraud, possibly murder. His ex-wife died under suspicious circumstances 8 years ago. Same pattern. Life insurance policy taken out shortly before death. I'm sending you everything we have." The third call was to the prosecutor's office. Margaret Reeves answered. 28 years in the DA's office. She'd handled every kind of case from petty theft to capital murder. "Margaret, it's Lauren. I'm sending you the Carter kidnapping file, but I want you to look at something else too." Shepard explained about Rebecca, about the insurance policies, about the pattern. When she finished, Margaret was quiet for 5 seconds. Then she said, "We're charging him with everything. Federal kidnapping, state charges for child endangerment, attempted murder, extortion, assault. And if that exhumation comes back showing foul play, we're adding first-degree murder. He'll never see daylight again." "Good. How's the girl?" "Sophie. She's going to be okay. Physically, anyway. Emotionally, she's got a long road. But she's got her father, and apparently she's got a 12-year-old Girl Scout who's not going to let her go through this alone. The Brooks kid, yeah, they've bonded. Hospital staff says they refuse to be separated." Margaret made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sobbie. "Sometimes the universe gets it right," she said. "Sometimes the right person is in the right place at the right time. And sometimes that person is a 12-year-old girl who decides that keeping a promise matters more than her own safety." "Yeah," Shepard said, "sometimes." Monday morning, 24 hours after the rescue, Ryan Carter sat in a cell at the Buncombe County Detention Center. His bail hearing had been scheduled for that afternoon, but Margaret Reeves had already filed her recommendation. No bail, flight risk, danger to witnesses, pattern of violence, federal kidnapping charge. This man walks free, people die. Ryan knew he wasn't getting out. He'd been read his charges: federal kidnapping with intent to harm, state charges for child endangerment resulting in bodily harm, attempted murder, extortion, assault. And there was something else. Something the detective had mentioned when she'd questioned him Sunday night. Rebecca. They were reopening the investigation into Rebecca's death. They'd found the insurance documents in his apartment. They'd seen the pattern, and now they were exhuming her body. Ryan put his head in his hands. It was over. All of it. The money, the revenge, the plan he'd spent 10 years perfecting. Destroyed by a 12-year-old girl he'd never known was there. In the hospital, Ren and Sophie were watching cartoons. Sophie had asked if they could watch something normal, something that wasn't scary, something that reminded her that the world had good things in it too. So they were watching old episodes of a show about talking animals going on adventures. It was exactly what both of them needed. Marcus and Garrett sat in chairs by the window, watching their daughters, not talking, just being present. At 11 a.m. there was a knock on the door. Bear Morrison walked in, followed by Lawman Hayes, and Dr. Malcolm Sullivan, the club's medic. 51 years old, combat veteran, hands that had saved lives in places most people couldn't pronounce. Hey, Bear said. We're not staying long. Just wanted to check on our girls. Sophie smiled. Hi, Bear. Hi, sweetheart. You doing okay? Yeah, Ren and I are watching cartoons. Bear looked at Ren. How about you, Scout? You holding up? Ren nodded. I'm okay. Good, because we've got something for you. Well, for both of you. He pulled out 2 envelopes. This one's for Sophie. He handed it to Marcus, who opened it. Inside was a card, signed by 127 Hell's Angels. Every brother who'd searched. Every rider who'd shown up in the middle of the night to help find a missing 9-year-old. The message was simple. You're loved, you're safe, your family, always. Sophie held it, read every signature, started crying happy tears. And this one, Bear said, handing the second envelope to Garrett, is for Ren. Garrett opened it. Inside was a card with a single sentence. A scout is trustworthy. This scout proved it. Below it, 127 signatures. And at the bottom, a handwritten note from Bear. You're one of us now. When you need us, we're there. No exceptions, no questions, forever. Ren took the card. She didn't cry, but her hands shook. Thank you, she whispered. No, Bear said. Thank you for being exactly who you needed to be when it mattered most. He looked at both girls. You two take care of each other. You hear me? You've got something special. Don't let it go. Sophie and Ren looked at each other. We won't, they said together. And somewhere in a cell 30 miles away, Ryan Carter sat alone and realized that he'd lost everything. Not because the police caught him, but because a 12-year-old girl had made a promise and kept it, no matter what it cost. The charges against Ryan Michael Carter were filed at 3:47 p.m. Sunday afternoon, exactly 5 hours after his arrest. The prosecutor was Margaret Reeves, 28 years in the district attorney's office. She'd handled every kind of case from petty theft to capital murder. She'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. She'd learned long ago not to be surprised by how low people could sink. But when she reviewed the evidence in the Carter kidnapping case, when she read about the cabin location, saw the photographs of the rope marks on Sophie's wrists, read the ransom text, heard the recording of Ryan's confession, overheard by Ren Brooks, examined the 67-hour timeline, her face went cold. Felony kidnapping across state lines, she said, ticking off charges on her fingers. Her assistant, a young attorney named David Mitchell, sat across from her, taking notes. Federal charge, child endangerment resulting in bodily harm, attempted murder, extortion, assault. She pulled another folder. And we're adding something else. David looked up. What? We found documents in Ryan's apartment, insurance policies, one on Sophie Carter taken out 3 weeks ago, $250,000 payout, beneficiary listed as Ryan Carter. David's eyes widened. He was planning to kill her and collect. Yes, and here's the part that makes me sick. Margaret pulled out a second file. Older, yellowed pages. We found an older policy too, on Ryan's ex-wife Rebecca Carter. She died in 2011 of what the death certificate listed as complications from pneumonia. The policy had paid out $180,000 to Ryan, 2 months after he had taken it out. Silence in the office. He's done this before, David whispered. He's done this before, so we're charging him with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain. And we're reopening the investigation into Rebecca's death. If we can prove he killed his wife 8 years ago, we're looking at consecutive sentences. He'll die in prison. The bail hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. Margaret's recommendation was blunt in its simplicity. No bail, flight risk, danger to witnesses, pattern of violence, federal kidnapping charge. This man walks free, people die. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Holloway, who'd presided over family court for 20 years before criminal court, who'd seen what happened to children when systems failed them, read the recommendation. Read the evidence file, looked at Ryan Carter standing in orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, and denied bail without hesitation. Ryan Carter would await trial from a cell in the Buncombe County Detention Center. And given the evidence, given the witnesses, given the fact that he'd been caught in the act with a kidnapped child and a written ransom demand on his phone, the trial itself would be short. 3 days. That's how long it took. The jury deliberated for 97 minutes, guilty on all counts. But before the trial, before the sentencing, before justice was served in a courtroom, something else had to happen. Rebecca Carter had to tell her story. The exhumation order was signed on Monday, October 21st, 2019. Rebecca Ann Carter had been buried in Greenville Memorial Gardens in South Carolina, a small plot under an oak tree. Her headstone read, "Beloved Wife, 1983-2011. The medical examiner's team arrived at dawn on Tuesday, October 22nd. They worked carefully, respectfully. This wasn't just evidence. This was someone's mother, someone's daughter, someone who'd been loved. The casket was removed, transported to the medical examiner's facility in Greenville, and on Wednesday, October 23rd, Dr. Sarah Mitchell performed the autopsy that would change everything. She found it in the tissue samples. Ethylene glycol, antifreeze. The levels were consistent with chronic poisoning over a period of 2 to 3 weeks. Small doses, administered regularly, enough to cause organ failure but not enough to raise immediate suspicion. Rebecca Carter hadn't died of pneumonia. She'd been murdered. Dr. Mitchell also found Rebecca's personal effects, including a diary that had been buried with her, a small leather-bound journal that Rebecca's sister had placed in the casket during the funeral. The last entry was dated 3 days before Rebecca's death. "Ryan threatened me again today. Said if I left him, I'd regret it. Said he'd make sure I never saw a penny of his money. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I can't prove he's poisoning me, but I know he is. I feel sick all the time. The doctors say it's pneumonia, but the medicine isn't working. I think he's putting something in my food. I'm so scared." Dr. Mitchell called Detective Shepard immediately. "You were right," she said. "Rebecca Carter was murdered. Antifreeze poisoning, chronic exposure over approximately 3 weeks, and we have a diary entry indicating she suspected her husband was poisoning her." Shepard was quiet for 3 seconds. "Can you testify to this in court?" "Absolutely, I'll stake my career on it. This is homicide, first degree, premeditated, for financial gain. Send me everything." On Thursday, October 24th, Margaret Reeves added new charges to Ryan Carter's indictment. First-degree murder in the death of Rebecca Ann Carter. Insurance fraud. 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain. When Ryan's public defender, a tired man in his 50s named Gerald Porter, who'd been assigned this case and knew it was unwinnable, read the amended charges, he closed his eyes. "They found Rebecca," he said. Ryan, sitting across from him in the attorney-client room at the detention center, said nothing. "They exhumed her body. They found antifreeze poisoning. They found her diary. She wrote that she suspected you were poisoning her." Still nothing. "Ryan, you need to understand what's happening here. The federal kidnapping charge alone carries a mandatory minimum of 30 years. The attempted murder of Sophie, another 25. The state charges another 15. And now we've got first-degree murder of Rebecca with special circumstances. Financial gain. That's life without parole." Gerald leaned forward. "They're going to bury you. The evidence is overwhelming. You were caught in the act with Sophie. There are witnesses. There's physical evidence. There's your confession overheard by Ren Brooks. And now there's proof you killed your wife 8 years ago the same way you planned to kill your niece." He paused. "I can try to negotiate a plea. Life in prison instead of life without parole. Maybe avoid the death penalty if the DA decides to seek it. But you need to give me something to work with." Ryan looked up. "I want to see my brother." "Marcus won't." "I want to see my brother. Tell him I'll confess to everything. I'll plead guilty to all charges. But I want to see Marcus first." Gerald hesitated. Then he made the call. Marcus Carter sat in the visiting room at Buncombe County Detention Center on Friday, October 25th at 2 in the afternoon. He hadn't wanted to come. Bear had advised against it. Lawman had said it was a bad idea. Sophie, recovering at home now with daily therapy sessions, had cried and begged him not to go. But something in Marcus needed to look his brother in the eye one more time, to see if there was anything left of the boy Marcus had grown up with. The brother who'd taught Marcus to ride a bike, who'd covered for Marcus when he'd snuck out to see a girl, who'd been Marcus's best friend before the drugs, before the stealing, before everything went to hell. Ryan was brought in wearing orange, hands cuffed, ankles shackled. He sat down across from Marcus. For 30 seconds, neither spoke. Then Ryan said, "She looks like Mom." Marcus's jaw clenched. Don't you dare talk about Sophie. I'm just saying she has Mom's eyes. I noticed that when I..." When you kidnapped her, when you tied her to a chair and gagged her and told her you were going to kill her whether I paid the ransom or not. Ryan looked down. I was angry. You were insane. You are insane. What you did to Sophie, what you did to Rebecca, that's not anger. That's evil. Rebecca was, don't. Marcus's voice dropped, deadly quiet. Don't try to justify it. I read her diary. She knew. She knew you were killing her, and she was too scared to leave. She wrote that she felt sick every day, that the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong, that she suspected you were putting something in her food. Ryan's face was blank. And she was right, Marcus continued. The medical examiner found antifreeze in her tissue samples. You poisoned your wife for 3 weeks, watched her suffer, watched her die, and then you collected $180,000. Marcus leaned forward, and then you tried to do the same thing to my daughter, your own niece, a 9-year-old girl. You forged my signature on an insurance policy. You planned this for weeks. You studied her schedule. You snatched her from school. You tied her up in a cabin and threatened to kill her. His voice broke. Why would you do this? Ryan looked up. His eyes were empty. Because you took everything from me. When you told Dad I was using, when you testified against me, you destroyed my life. I had nothing. No family, no money, no respect. You had everything. So you decided to take my daughter. I decided to make you feel what I felt, to make you lose everything the way I lost everything. Marcus stood. I came here because some part of me, some stupid part, thought maybe you'd show remorse, maybe you'd apologize, maybe you'd prove you were still human. He looked at Ryan. But you're not. You're a monster. And I hope you rot in that cell for the rest of your miserable life. Marcus turned to leave. Wait, Ryan said. Marcus stopped, didn't turn around. I'm pleading guilty to everything. The lawyer said if I cooperate, maybe I avoid the death penalty. Maybe I get life instead of life without parole. And you want what, my blessing? I want you to tell Sophie I'm sorry. Now Marcus turned. You want me to tell my 9-year-old daughter who still wakes up screaming from nightmares about being tied to a chair while you threatened to kill her that you're sorry? Ryan nodded. Marcus walked back to the table, leaned down, spoke directly into Ryan's face. No, you don't get that. You don't get to ease your conscience by having me deliver your apology. You made your choices. You live with them. And Sophie, she's never going to think about you again, because I'm going to make sure she knows she's loved. She's safe. She's protected. She has a family, real family, not just blood, but brothers who showed up to search for her, a 12-year-old girl who risked her life to save her, people who choose her every single day. Marcus straightened. That's what family is. Not you, not this, never this. He walked out. He didn't look back. The trial of Ryan Michael Carter began on Monday, November 4th, 2019. The prosecution called 23 witnesses over 3 days. Detective Lawrence Shepard testified about the evidence found in Ryan's apartment, the maps, the supplies, the forged insurance documents. The medical examiner, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, testified about Rebecca's autopsy, the antifreeze poisoning, the diary entries. Dr. Patricia Brennan, the helicopter medic, testified about Sophie's condition when she was found: severe dehydration, hypothermia, rope burns, the timeline indicating she would not have survived another 12 hours. Marcus testified about receiving the ransom text, about the 67-hour deadline, about finding his daughter tied to a chair in an abandoned cabin. And Ren Brooks, 12 years old, wearing her Girl Scout uniform, testified about what she'd witnessed. She described hearing footsteps Thursday night, seeing Ryan carry unconscious Sophie through the forest, following them to the cabin, watching Ryan tie Sophie up, hearing his confession about planning to kill her regardless of whether ransom was paid, hearing him mention the insurance policy. The defense attorney tried to challenge her testimony. You're 12 years old, Gerald Porter said, not unkindly, but doing his job. It was dark. You were tired. Isn't it possible you misheard? That you misunderstood what Mr. Carter was saying? Ren looked at him steadily. No, sir. I heard him clearly. He said, and I quote, I'm keeping the money and I'm killing you anyway because money won't fix what he did to me. Only losing you will make him feel what I felt. And you remember that exactly. Yes, sir. I wrote it in my journal that night. I have the journal if you'd like to see it. She did. The prosecution had already entered it as evidence. Her journal with the entry dated Thursday, October 17th. I found a kidnapped girl. Her uncle is going to kill her in 67 hours. I'm not leaving her. And below that, detailed notes about everything Ryan had said. The jury listened. They looked at the evidence. The photographs of Sophie tied to the chair, the rope with her DNA on it, the burner phone with the ransom text, the insurance documents, Rebecca's diary, the autopsy report showing chronic antifreeze poisoning. And they looked at Ryan Carter, who sat emotionless through 3 days of testimony, who showed no remorse, no regret, nothing. On Thursday, November 7th, the jury deliberated for 97 minutes. They returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts, federal kidnapping with intent to harm, child endangerment resulting in bodily harm, attempted murder, extortion, assault, insurance fraud, first-degree murder in the death of Rebecca Ann Carter, conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain. Every single charge. Guilty. The sentencing hearing was held 2 weeks later on Thursday, November 21st, 2019. Judge Patricia Holloway had presided over the trial. She'd heard every piece of evidence, seen every photograph, read Rebecca's diary entries, watched Sophie's recorded testimony, which had been done via video to minimize trauma. She'd also read the victim impact statements. Marcus had written about what it felt like to receive that ransom text, to spend 67 hours not knowing if his daughter was alive or dead, to search hundreds of square miles of forest knowing every minute could be the difference between finding her alive or finding her body. Sophie had written with help from her therapist about the nightmares, about being afraid to sleep alone, about how she still sometimes feels the rope on her wrists, about how a 12-year-old girl she'd never met had become the bravest person she'd ever known because Ren had stayed when she could have run. Rebecca's sister had written about watching her sister die, about believing it was pneumonia, about the guilt of not knowing Rebecca was being murdered, about the 8 years of grief that had now transformed into rage. Judge Holloway read every word. Then she looked at Ryan Carter. "Mr. Carter," she said. Her voice was steady, cold. "You kidnapped your own niece. You held her captive for 60 hours with the intention of murdering her regardless of whether ransom was paid. You traumatized a 9-year-old child who trusted you. You exploited family bonds for financial gain." She paused. "And evidence proves beyond any doubt that you did this before. 8 years ago, you murdered your wife, Rebecca Carter, through chronic poisoning. You watched her suffer for weeks. You collected $180,000 in insurance money. And then you planned to do the exact same thing to your niece." Judge Holloway leaned forward. "I've been on the bench for 34 years. I've seen terrible things. But what you did represents a level of calculated cruelty that shocks the conscience. You didn't kill in the heat of passion. You didn't make a mistake. You planned. You prepared. You executed a scheme to murder 2 people, one of them a child, for money." She opened the sentencing document. "For the federal charge of kidnapping with intent to harm, I sentence you to 35 years in federal prison. For the state charge of attempted murder of Sophie Carter, I sentence you to 25 years. For first-degree murder in the death of Rebecca Carter with special circumstances, I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." Ryan's face went white. "These sentences will run concurrently. You will serve a minimum of 35 years on the federal charge. But because of the murder conviction, you will never be eligible for parole. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison." She looked at him directly. "Additionally, there is a permanent restraining order preventing you from any contact whatsoever with Sophie Carter, Marcus Carter, or any member of their family. Any attempt to contact them directly or indirectly will result in additional charges." Judge Holloway picked up her gavel. "The court also orders full restitution to both victims for medical expenses, trauma counseling, and related costs. And I am personally recommending that the state conduct a thorough review of insurance fraud cases to ensure this pattern is identified and prevented in the future." She looked at Ryan one last time. "You preyed on the most vulnerable people in your family. You failed. And now you'll spend the rest of your functional life in prison thinking about how a 12-year-old girl outsmarted you. The gavel fell. Court adjourned. Ryan Carter was led away. He would be transferred to a federal penitentiary within 30 days. He would die there. But that was the legal ending. The courtroom ending. The ending that satisfied justice on paper. The real ending, the one that mattered to Sophie and Ren and Marcus, had already begun. It began in a hospital room on that Sunday afternoon in October, when two girls, 9 and 12, had looked at each other and understood that they'd survived something together that had changed them both forever. It continued through the weeks that followed. Through the therapy sessions Sophie attended 3 times a week with a counselor who specialized in childhood trauma. Through the nights, Ren woke up from dreams where she was back under the cabin floor watching through the gap, terrified that this time she wouldn't be fast enough, wouldn't be smart enough, wouldn't be able to keep her promise. Through the Sunday dinners that became tradition. Every week, Ren and Garrett at Marcus's house, spaghetti and garlic bread and stories about anything except that cabin. Through the moments when Sophie would reach for Ren's hand without saying anything, just needing to know she was there. Through the afternoons when Marcus would teach Ren basic motorcycle maintenance because she'd asked about it, and he'd never been able to say no to either of his daughters. Because that's what Ren was now. Marcus's daughter, not by blood, but by choice. By the bond forged when a 12-year-old girl had decided that a 9-year-old she'd never met mattered more than her own safety. 6 months after that October night on a warm April afternoon in 2020, Sophie Carter turned 10 years old. The party was held at the Hellsangels clubhouse on the east side of Asheville. The building was nondescript from the outside. Cinder block walls, gravel parking lot, a hand-painted sign that said private property. But inside, the main room had been transformed. Purple streamers hung from the ceiling. Balloons clustered in corners. A table held a cake decorated with unicorns, Sophie's favorite. There were presents wrapped in shiny paper. There was music playing, nothing too loud, just background noise. And there were 47 Hells Angels. Every member of the Asheville chapter. They wore their cuts, their patches, their leather and denim. They looked exactly like what they were. Rough, intimidating men with hard faces and harder histories. And they were celebrating a little girl's birthday like she was the most important person in the world. Because to them, she was. Sophie wore a purple dress. Her hair was brushed and pulled back with clips. She smiled constantly. A real smile, not the careful, frightened expression she'd worn for weeks after the kidnapping. 6 months of therapy had helped. So had time. So had knowing that Ryan was in prison for 35 years minimum and would never hurt her again. But most of all, what had helped was feeling safe, surrounded by people who protected her, loved her, chose her. Ren was there too. Of course she was. She'd become a fixture in Sophie's life over the past 6 months. She came to dinner at Marcus's house every Sunday. She helped Sophie with math homework, her best subject. She taught her basic wilderness skills, the same ones Garrett had taught Ren. How to build a fire, how to read a compass, how to tie knots. Sophie called her big sister. Ren didn't correct her. At the party, Ren wore the vest Marcus had given her, the miniature Hells Angels cut with the honorary member patch. She'd grown a little in 6 months, maybe an inch, maybe 5 pounds, but the vest still fit. She wore it over a button-down shirt trying to look presentable and stood near the cake table looking slightly overwhelmed by all the bikers. Bear Morrison walked up, carrying a can of soda in one massive hand. "You doing okay, kid?" Ren nodded. "Yes, sir." "You don't have to call me sir. I work for a living." Bear grinned. The expression transformed his granite face into something almost gentle. "You want to know something?" "Sure." "That vest you're wearing, we've given out exactly 3 honorary memberships in the 40-year history of this chapter. One to a cop who saved a brother's life during a shooting, one to a doctor who treated our guys for free when they couldn't afford hospital bills, and one to you." Ren's eyes widened. 3, that's it. That's it, because we don't give that away. You have to earn it, and you did. You saved one of ours. That means something. That means everything. Bear put a hand on Ren's shoulder. "You're going to do great things, kid. I can tell. You're going to be the kind of person who stands up when it matters. The kind who keeps promises. The kind who protects people who can't protect themselves. And when you do those things when you're older, when you're out in the world making it better, you remember that you learned how to do it when you were 12. In these woods, alone, scared, and you did it anyway. Wren's throat closed up. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Bear squeezed her shoulder once, then walked away to refill the punch bowl. Marcus appeared a moment later, carrying a wrapped gift. "This is from the chapter," he said, handing it to Wren. "Open it." Wren tore the paper carefully. Inside was a frame. Behind the glass was Wren's journal, the same waterproof notebook she'd carried for 3 days in the forest, the one where she'd written, "I found a kidnapped girl. Her uncle is going to kill her in 67 hours. I'm not leaving her." The page was open to that entry, and below it, every member of the Asheville chapter had signed. Their road names in various handwriting styles: Bear, Reaper, Lawman, Doc, Hammer, Chain, Ghost. 47 signatures surrounding Wren's words. At the bottom, someone had added a line in careful script: "A scout is trustworthy." This scout proved it. Asheville Hells Angels. October 2019, we don't forget. "We're going to hang this in the clubhouse," Marcus said, "right over the bar. So every brother who comes through here, every prospect, every guest, they see what you did. They see what real courage looks like." Wren stared at the frame, at her own handwriting from 6 months ago, at the signatures surrounding it. "I just did what I was supposed to do," she said quietly. "No," Marcus said. "You did what most people can't do. That's the difference. That's why it matters." Across the room, Sophie was laughing. Dr. Sullivan, the combat medic, was showing her a magic trick with a quarter, making it disappear and reappear behind her ear. She clapped and demanded he do it again. She looked happy, healthy, whole. Wren watched her and felt something settle in her chest, a kind of peace she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Sophie was okay. That's what mattered. She was safe and loved and surrounded by people who would die before they let anyone hurt her again. Wren had kept her promise. 3 months after that, in July 2020, Wren Brooks received the Carnegie Hero Medal, a bronze medallion awarded for acts of civilian heroism. She was the youngest female recipient in North Carolina history. The ceremony was small, just family, her Girl Scout troop, and a few reporters. Wren stood on a stage in the Asheville Community Center wearing her full Girl Scout uniform. 21 merit badges, including wilderness survival, finally earned sewn onto her vest in neat rows. The medal was presented by the regional coordinator for the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission, a man in his 70s who'd given out hundreds of these medals and had seen every kind of bravery imaginable. "Wren Brooks," he said, reading from prepared remarks, "demonstrated extraordinary courage and skill when she discovered a kidnapping in progress and chose to remain with the victim rather than seek her own safety. For 67 hours in adverse weather conditions with limited supplies, she kept a 9-year-old girl alive while simultaneously signaling rescue teams and marking trails to her location. Her actions directly resulted in the successful rescue and the arrest of the perpetrator. This medal is awarded in recognition of her selfless heroism." He pinned the medal to Wren's uniform. The room applauded. Garrett stood at attention. Park ranger uniform pressed crisp, eyes shining with pride, so fierce it was almost painful to see. And in the front row, Sophie and Marcus sat together. Sophie wore a purple dress. Marcus wore his cut. They clapped the loudest. After the ceremony, reporters asked Wren questions. "What made you decide to stay instead of running for help?" Wren thought about it. "I did the math. If I ran, it would take 90 minutes to get help. Then they'd have to organize a search. Then they'd have to find the cabin, which was 3 miles off any trail. That could take hours, maybe days. And he said he was going to kill her in 67 hours. I didn't know if they'd make it in time, but if I stayed, if I kept her alive and left markers and signaled, I could buy more time. I could make sure she lasted until they got there." "Were you scared?" "Yes, the whole time, but she was more scared. And she needed someone to not be alone. So I stayed." "What would you say to other kids who might find themselves in a similar situation?" Wren looked directly at the camera. "Trust your training. Whatever you've learned, Girl Scout skills, first aid, anything. Trust it. And don't run away from hard things just because they're hard. Sometimes the right thing to do is the scary thing. And that's okay. You can be scared and brave at the same time." The reporter smiled. "Any final thoughts?" Yeah, keep your promises. If you tell someone you're going to help them. Help them. Don't quit because it's difficult. Promises matter. By November 2020, Ren had advanced to first-class rank in Girl Scouts. The Board of Review was scheduled for Saturday, November 14th. Normally, reviews were held at the troop's meeting place, usually a church or community center. But Ren's troop leader, Barbara Peterson, made a call to Marcus 2 weeks before the review. Marcus, I have an unusual request. Would you let us hold Ren's Board of Review at your clubhouse? She earned this rank in your world as much as ours. Seems right to have both communities there. Marcus agreed immediately. So on November 14th at 2 p.m. Ren walked into the Hells Angels clubhouse wearing her full Class A Girl Scout uniform. Every patch, every badge, every award she'd earned in 6 years of scouting. The Board of Review panel sat at a table. Her scout leader, 2 other adult leaders, and a district representative from the Blue Ridge Council. Behind them, filling the rest of the room, were 47 Hells Angels in their cuts and 23 members of Troop 47 in their uniforms. 2 communities that normally never overlapped, sitting together, united by respect for one kid who'd proven that courage and character matter more than age. Sophie and Marcus sat in the front row. Garrett sat beside them. The review began. The district representative asked standard questions. Ren answered them all. Her community project, her leadership positions in the troop, her understanding of the Girl Scout promise and law. Then Barbara Peterson asked a different question. Ren, when you found Sophie in those woods, you made a choice. You could have run for help. That would have been the safe choice. Instead, you stayed. Why? Ren was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because running was easier, staying was right, and the scout law says a scout is helpful and brave. I couldn't be helpful from 3 miles away. I had to be there. I had to keep the promise I made when I told her I wouldn't leave. And you didn't sleep for 3 days. You gave away your food and your jacket. You built fires and left trail markers and signaled for help, all while watching a kidnapper who would have killed you if he'd discovered you. Most adults couldn't do that. How did you? I just took it 1 hour at a time, Ren said. I didn't think about how scared I was or how tired I was. I thought about what needed to happen next. Next meal for Sophie. Next signal fire. Next trail marker. If I thought about the whole 3 days at once, it was too big. But 1 hour I could do 1 hour, then another hour, then another. Barbara nodded slowly. That's wisdom most people don't learn until they're much older. If they learn it at all. She looked at the other panel members. They nodded. Ren Brooks, Barbara said, standing. On behalf of the Blue Ridge Council and Troop 47, it is my honor to advance you to the rank of first class. You have demonstrated leadership, service, and character at the highest level. You embody everything Girl Scouting stands for. The room erupted in applause. Every scout stood. Every biker stood. A standing ovation that lasted 2 full minutes. Marcus stepped forward. He wasn't on the review panel, but nobody was going to stop him from speaking. Ren, he said, I'm not a Girl Scout. I never was. But I know what honor looks like. I know what sacrifice looks like. And I know what it means to keep a promise when keeping it costs you everything. He gestured to the framed journal hanging on the wall above the bar, the one with 47 signatures surrounding Ren's words. That's your legacy, not just that you saved my daughter, but that you showed everyone in this room, everyone who knows your story, what real courage is. It's not about being unafraid. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. It's about keeping promises even when breaking them would be easier. Marcus's voice roughened. You're 13 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. And I promise you this, whatever you choose to do, wherever you go, you're going to make the world better. Because you already did. You already saved a life. And that's not something you do once and forget. That's who you are. Sophie was crying, happy tears. She ran up to Ren and hugged her, not caring that she was interrupting a formal ceremony, not caring that 70 people were watching. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Ren hugged her back. You don't have to keep thanking me. I know, but I will anyway. This story isn't really about bikers or badges or wilderness survival. It's about a choice one girl made when nobody would have blamed her for choosing differently. It's about looking at an impossible situation, a kidnapped girl, A murderous plan, 500,000 acres of forest, 67 hours ticking away, and deciding that doing nothing wasn't an option, even when doing something meant risking everything. It's about the promise Wren made when she whispered through the floorboards, "I'm not leaving you," and how she kept that promise through 3 days and nights of cold and hunger and exhaustion and fear. It's about how Marcus and 126 other Hell's Angels mobilized in minutes when they heard a child was missing. How they searched for 67 hours straight without sleep. How they coordinated with police and search teams and never once let ego or reputation get in the way of finding that little girl. It's about Garrett Brooks, who raised his daughter to have the skills and the character to survive in the wilderness, and how those lessons saved 2 lives, Sophie's and Wren's both. But most of all, it's about this. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is being absolutely terrified and doing the right thing anyway. Wren was 12. She was alone. She was scared. She could have run. She stayed because staying was right, and because a scout keeps her promises. Today, Wren Brooks is 16. She's a junior at Asheville High School, planning to study forestry and environmental science at NC State. She still volunteers with the Stay Found Wilderness Safety Program she developed for her Girl Scout Gold Award project. 1,847 children have been trained in her system. She still has dinner with Sophie and Marcus every Sunday. The Carnegie Hero Medal hangs in her bedroom next to her first-class certificate and the miniature Hell's Angels vest. She doesn't talk about what she did very often. When people ask, she says, "I just did what anyone should do." But that's not true, because most people wouldn't do it. Most people would run. Most people would choose safety over sacrifice. Wren chose differently. And because she didn't, Sophie Carter is alive. She's 13 now, an 8th grader. She plays soccer and gets straight A's and wants to be a veterinarian. She volunteers with an organization that helps kidnapping victims recover and rebuild. She speaks at schools about resilience and trauma and healing. And every October 17th, the anniversary of the worst day of her life, and the best, she and Wren go back to Pisgah National Forest together. They hike to the ridge where Wren built her final signal fire. They don't go to the cabin. They don't need to revisit that place. But they go to the ridge where hope happened, where a 12-year-old girl waved her arms at a helicopter and said, "She's down there, please help her." They sit on the rocks and watch the sun come up over the mountains, and they don't talk much. They don't need to. The promise was kept. That's all that matters. On this particular October morning, October 17th, 2023, 4 years after that Thursday night, Wren and Sophie sit side by side watching dawn break over the Blue Ridge. Sophie wears her Girl Scout uniform now. She joined Troop 47 because of Wren. She's working toward first class herself. Wren wears the Hell's Angels vest over a flannel shirt. She's taller now, 16 and finally growing into herself, but the vest still fits. "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd run that night?" Sophie asks. Wren considers this. "Sometimes, but not the way you think. I don't wonder if it was the right choice. I know it was. I just wonder if I would have lived with myself if I'd left you." "You would have. You were 12. Nobody would have blamed you." "I would have blamed me." Sophie leans against Wren's shoulder. "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too." They watch the sun climb higher, orange and gold spreading across the sky. Behind them, they hear the rumble of motorcycles. Marcus has arrived, with Bear, with Lawman, with Doc Sullivan. They do this every year. Come to the ridge on the anniversary, stand witness to the place where everything changed. Marcus walks up, puts a hand on each girl's shoulder. "You two doing okay?" "Yeah, Dad," they say in unison, because that's what Marcus is to both of them now. Dad. Not just to Sophie by blood, but to Wren by choice. By the bond forged when she decided that a 9-year-old girl mattered more than anything else. "You know what I was thinking about on the ride up here," Marcus says. "What?" Wren asks. "I was thinking about how my brother tried to take everything from me. My daughter, my peace, my faith that the world has good in it. He tried to destroy all of that." He pauses. "But he failed because he didn't account for you. He didn't know that while he was planning murder, you were out here learning to keep promises, learning to be brave, learning that some things matter more than being safe. Marcus's voice is thick with emotion. Ryan took my brother from me, the one I grew up with, the one I loved before the drugs destroyed him. But he gave me something too. He gave me a daughter I never knew I needed. He gave me you, Ren, and that's not a trait I would have chosen. But it's the one I got, and I'm grateful for it every single day. Ren stands, hugs him, Sophie joins them, and the three of them stand there on the ridge as the sun rises and the hellsangels wait respectfully behind them, and the mountains stretch out forever in every direction. A promise kept, a family formed, a story that proves heroes don't always come from where you expect. Sometimes they come from a 12-year-old girl with a Girl Scout handbook, in a ranger's daughter's courage, in a belief that promises matter more than fear. If this story moved you, pay attention. There are Sophies everywhere. Kids who are hurting, kids who are scared, kids who need someone to notice, to ask the uncomfortable questions, to refuse to look away. There are Wrens everywhere too. Kids who have more courage and character than most adults. Kids who are capable of extraordinary things if we teach them the skills and trust them with responsibility. And there are people like Marcus everywhere. People who look scary, who society tells us to avoid, who turn out to be exactly the protectors we need when everything falls apart. You don't need a motorcycle or a merit badge or 67 hours in the wilderness to make a difference. You just need to care enough to stay when leaving would be easier, to keep promises even when breaking them would be simpler, to do the right thing even when the right thing is hard. Ren was 12. If she can do it, so can you. So pay attention. Listen when a child hesitates. Ask the questions everyone else is too polite to ask. Care enough to intervene even if your voice shakes. Because somewhere out there right now, there's a kid who needs someone to make the choice Ren made. To stay instead of run. To promise instead of turn away. To be brave when being brave is the only thing that matters. Be that person. And if you already are, if you're a teacher who notices a neighbor who asks a stranger who helps, thank you. Keep going, keep caring, keep being the person who stays. The world needs more Wrens, more people like Marcus, more people who understand that protection isn't about size or strength. It's about showing up. It's about keeping promises. It's about refusing to let someone face darkness alone. That's the story. That's the lesson. And that's the promise. If we teach our kids to be competent, to be brave, to keep their word, they'll grow into adults who change the world, one kept promise at a time. Everyone needs someone who won't leave. Everyone deserves their own Wren.